reservations of several European countries regarding the free trade agreement with the Mercosur countries. Government spokesperson Sophie Primer stated that these countries had raised the issue of protecting European agriculture. The trade deal was signed in December but has yet to be ratified by the European Union member states and the European Parliament. To enter into force, the treaty must be approved by a qualified majority of member states, while blocking the treaty would require at least 4 member states representing around 35% of the EU population. France, Ireland, the Netherlands, Austria and Poland are already opposing the treaty. By contrast, big exporting member states like Germany, Sweden and Denmark are pushing for the treaty to be ratified, given the opportunity for European car makers and pharmaceutical companies. EU Foreign Policy Chief is briefed about the deal. Listen in.
La position de la France, le travail qui a été réalisé par les différents ministres, ministre de l'Agriculture, des Affaires européennes, ministre du Commerce extérieur, le Premier ministre, les 2 premiers ministres, Michel Barnier et François Bayrou, et le président de la République lui-même, a permis de rallier un certain nombre de pays européens aux réserves, aux grandes réserves que nous avions sur l'accord Mercosur. Et il permet aujourd'hui que l'Union européenne et singulièrement la présidente ait entendu les réserves émises par ces pays-là et ait accepté d'actionner les clauses de sauvegarde.
The Commission put forward proposals today for new deals with Mercosur and Mexico. Mercosur will be the EU's biggest trade deal to date, a free trade area with 700 million customers. This is a key trade pact and strategic step for European global influence.
And farmers are expected to protest in Brussels against both the Mercosur deal and the EU-US Framework Agreement on Trade, as lobby group European coordinator has warned that the treaty threatens livelihoods, fuels unfair competition and would flood the EU with unsafe, cheap produce. We have with us Mr. Ross Feingold, political analyst. Mr. Feingold, what do you make of some of the fine print as far as this particular deal is concerned? We do know that European markets and especially the European economy does want to open up to the rest of the world. Given the current tariffs as well from America, it's a golden opportunity for Europe to look both towards the east and also towards some of the South American countries. But there are still clear reservations of some of the nations. How do you think they will really navigate this particular point?
There's a number of issues at play here. First, any free trade agreement or agreement that lowers trade barriers between 2 countries, or in this case, between multiple countries and on both sides, the Mercosur countries and the European Union, there are always winners and losers. There's always going to be some farmers or manufacturers, depending on the specific industry. There's always going to be winners or losers, and they have a voice, and they can put pressure on politicians to reject the deal. Another issue at play here is how the European Union normally goes about negotiating agreements with countries outside the EU bloc. And typically, the EU wouldn't take it as far as this has gone if the EU thought that it's going to fail at the national level. If the EU thought that this is going to be rejected at the member level, they probably wouldn't have taken the negotiations this far. So one has to assume that the EU leadership still thinks they could get this approved by the EU member countries. And that remains to be seen. As your report indicated, there's some controversy over this. And then another thing at play, which you alluded to, is the EU's interest and need to diversify its markets, to make deals with other trading blocs or with other countries, partially in response to what's occurred with the bilateral relationship with the United States and higher tariffs, which the EU has agreed to. They've entered into a trade agreement with the Trump administration, and also EU's trade tensions with China, the future of which is a bit unknown at the moment. So the EU definitely has an incentive right now to negotiate deals with other countries or with other trading blocs, and this agreement is the product of that.
But at the same time, Mr. Feingold, what does this really state about also the larger future of the European Union bloc as far as trade negotiations are concerned?
As I said, there's always going to be winners and losers, but I don't think the EU leadership in Brussels would have taken this agreement to this point if they thought it would be rejected. Now, it's possible it will be rejected. And if it's rejected, two things will happen. One, it would be a huge embarrassment for von der Leyen and the EU leadership. Secondly, it would probably put a pause on EU negotiations for similar agreements with other countries or other trading blocs. So we might think of Mercosur as relatively small and maybe a relatively small economic opportunity for the EU, despite the size which you indicated of the populations involved. But if this actually does get rejected at the EU member country, it would certainly have some significant long-term effects on the EU's ability to enter into similar agreements with other trading blocs or other countries.
Absolutely. Ms. Feingold, thank you so much for joining us on NewsX with that perspective.